insights and contributions. Let's see, you've got a new podcast.
I just released a new podcast. We've been doing this now for a few years. It's just another form of storytelling.
Yeah.
So I enjoy learning a new trick.
Yeah.
And so I've been interviewing. You know how big our community is and how many crazy cool innovators we have in it over all the years.
You got a lot of
summit on, right? So a lot of people who are glad to come in and do a half-hour discussion with me. It's called the Business Model Sandbox Podcast. You can see it on our website. The one we just released this month is really worth listening to. It's the president of WGU, Western Governors University. This is pretty amazing.
I listened to it.
I did. Pretty good, right?
Yeah, it's pretty
Like,
good.
Not me,
No.
him.
He's got, what, 90,000 students?
Scott Pulsifer. So this is, how we talk about innovating higher ed and colleges and universities, and we're struggling with how do we use technology and online versus in the classroom, and depending on how progressive you are as a leader at a university, you may resist it completely, or maybe you're just getting started to figure it out. These guys, WGU, 20 years old. They were the pioneer in all online. They have no bricks and mortar, right? And they today have 90,000 students enrolled, and they don't just focus on checking the boxes to get a degree, right? They focus on whether the degree is relevant and people can get a job and be successful in the workforce. Their statistics and outcomes are absolutely amazing. It's just an incredible story for anyone trying to transform, whatever it is, but certainly if you're in the education business and the higher ed space, you gotta hear the WGU story. You gotta listen to Scott Pulsifer. The other thing last thing I'll just share about that's really interesting is this is a university that, we often talk about political will and the role the politicians play in this.
Sure.
This thing was founded by 5 Western governors.
Yeah, right.
That started this thing, who said to their home state universities, you guys keep growing, you keep building, but you can't get there fast enough to meet the needs of our citizens. The internet had just become viable,
Right.
As a mechanism for online learning. And the governors had the political will to not only set it up, but no one of the 5 governors controlled it. Right? They actually set up the governance structure that gave them the freedom to innovate and get stronger. And now you wake up 20 years later, and you have 90,000 students. They put over 125,000 people through it.
Who has the T-shirt contract on that one?
Oh my goodness. Anyway, thanks for asking. The podcast is a lot of fun. I love having these conversations, as you can tell. And we've been doing it now for 2 years, so you can literally go back. It's on iTunes, so you can listen to it during drive time or whatever. And I've interviewed over the 2 years some pretty interesting folks on that.
Last week we talked about education. Gary was just on talking about polling. It looks like the vast majority of Rhode Islanders are in favor of it. I bounced off our discussion last
See, I
week
told
and
you.
stuck it to Gary a little bit and say, should we be looking
Sure
at a
you
little
did.
more than warmer and cooler or whatever
I'm sure.
whatever new roof and new windows. Healthcare's really in the news in Rhode Island right
goodness,
now.
yes, it
And
is.
we had a piece today about Care New England, who has shut down a major hospital in the
Right.
state, and 600-800 full-time employees or I guess employees are out, and about 600 of them were FTEs. It looks like we're just at the beginning of a real restructuring of healthcare in Rhode Island, and we're in a battle between titans like Brown University against mega titan Partners Healthcare in Boston. How do you see this, and where do you see next in this battle?
Yeah, well, just like we've talked about transforming the education system, healthcare is right there. We need to think about transformational solutions. The idea that we're just going to play at the margins and incrementally improve the healthcare system. This is a healthcare system that was built to treat us when we got sick. Right?
This
was a healthcare system.
And it was built
right.
100, functionally
A long time
from,
ago.
a long
But what's
time
changed
ago.
is this idea that we have to focus everything on what happens when we get sick, and it never really stepped up to the challenge of how about we actually do the things that keep us from getting sick in the first place.
Right.
And until we become more about wellness and well-being, and figure out how to build a model around that, and then say when we get sick, we should have the best technology and access. And hospitals, which are the highest cost place to get access to health care,
Right.
are so central to our U.S. healthcare system, right, that now all of a sudden the struggle is how do we find platforms that deliver better access, better healthcare outcomes, that don't have all of the bricks and mortar, don't have all of the cost of all the specialists that are in the hospitals, and a lot of stuff is moving out of hospitals. Not just Rhode Island. If you look across the country, right, over the course of the last 20 years, we've gone from, I'm going to give you approximate numbers, I think we had maybe 6,500 hospitals in the U.S. That number is now closer to 5,000, a little over 5,000. It has been steadily changing, but most of that has been out in the more rural areas,
Where
that
small
didn't have the
community-
critical mass.
Right.
Now you're starting to see hospitals like our own, hospital system.
But we don't seem
try
to have
revitalize.
any game plan. We're just reacting to whatever the chaos is. The anecdotal stories that are going on now is because of the closure of Memorial, the waiting time in the emergency room at Miriam Hospital, which is the closest hospital to, is now 3.5, 4 hours before you even touch a human being.
They have beds in the hallways.
They have beds in the hallway, and Miriam was a kind of place where, you got in and out and in a relatively short period of time. There seems to be no strategizing. It's just one crisis. The pension fund over at St. Joe's collapsed. Memorial's not viable. Landmark always seems a week away from
But
something catastrophic.
My question about that is, how many of the people that are going to a hospital-based emergency room, I'm sure there's a very significant percentage of them that belong there because they might need to be hospitalized.
Right.
But how many of them are there as opposed to going to a primary care doctor or a less expensive clinic, right, where they could get triaged and they could get cared for? Instead, we wait until we get really sick.
Right.
We don't take care of it, and then we're so sick that we've got to go into the ER and we've got to be on a bed in the hallway waiting for the cause. We've got to we have to transform that. We have to help families take better care of themselves. We got to provide information and tools and support for them to do it. And then, yes, when people get sick, we want the best possible care that we could get. But we can't sustain
Where does
the
that
current model.
innovation take place? Who's motivated to it? Is that if you're a healthcare company, listen, here's a lifespan. I think they're overjoyed this year. They made like $2 million on a $2 billion company. That's...
Yeah. Well, it's one of the few industries, most industries, we're always talking about technology, and most technology advances have produced lower cost access and made these services available to a broader part of our population.
Right.
Healthcare's got to be the only system in the world where we add technology and the costs keep going higher and higher and higher. And so now we're in a position where we're not competitive. Right. We're not competitive nationally versus other countries because we've allowed the cost to escalate without figuring out what are the models to deliver better, high quality outcomes, right, at the same or less cost.
So is part of it, though, that it's too big to fail, right? Healthcare is such a mammoth part of our employment structure. It's a mammoth part of our economies. There's 70,000 Rhode Islanders who are either directly or indirectly related to the healthcare industry.
It's a big part of our economy.
Yeah, of our top 5 largest employers, 3 of them are healthcare companies, CVS, Lifespan, and Care New England. Are we just going to have to realize some very tough medicine to be able to, excuse the pun,
No pun.
to be able
No
to
pun intended.
transform?
Well,
and who's motivated? If I'm a nonprofit and I'm the head of Lifespan and I'm making $2 million a year all day long, am I really that excited about reinvent?
Yeah.
About
you're interested in innovating in those things that make you stronger and improve your competitive position. When you look at it through the lens of the economy, in terms of the number of jobs, right, you reach one conclusion. I think we've got to first and foremost look at a healthcare system that's about delivering to our citizens, right? Access to the tools and information they need to take better care of themselves, to be able to create better healthcare outcomes for the same or less money. Let's use technology to drive down the cost of healthcare, not continually drive up the cost of healthcare.
But if I'm CVS, listen, I'm
Yeah.
motivated. I've got shareholders. I'm the CEO. I'm the board of directors. If I don't start making some innovation that drives to a better bottom line, shareholder revolt. Look what's going on over at GE.
Right.
The
But
flip
here's
side.
here's
but
where
the
it's gonna
flip
come
side
from.
here, if I'm Care New England, okay, I've only got 43 days of cash on hand. Nothing seems to happen if I have 42 days, 41 days, or 40.
But here's what's gonna really drive the change. I think now let's talk about it through the lens of us, the consumers.
Sure.
Right? It used to be that we all had insurance and it covered everything, and the costs of healthcare were transparent to us.
Totally.
You know, right? And now, little by little, now it's not so little, the amount that I'm being asked to pay as a consumer, regardless of where my insurance comes from,
Sure.
is going up, where more of the costs of healthcare are being pushed out to the end consumer. And so all of a sudden, I care when my doctor, right, the specialist, the hospital, the pharmacy, right, starts to say, you know,
Well,
right,
what's
that-
my
that-
choice right now? My choice right now is I can go to Care New England's hospital, or I can go to Lifespan's hospital, or I can go to Prospect's hospital. Nobody's shaking it up too much within some degree. Prospect's a for-profit, so they might be doing a little more innovation. But when's the tipping point
Well, now you're
that
getting, now
transforms?
you're getting to what my normal message, right? Which is
This is it.
If you ask
This
me,
is it.
If you ask me, is Rhode Island innovating in healthcare? Is it actually exploring and testing the new models that will change this equation?
Right.
You know, that will actually figure out what the needs are of the population and create models to be able to do it, including payment models.
Right.
We should be the place in the country where that's happening. Right, we should be setting the trends for what's going to happen in healthcare to get better access, you know, for less money.
Right.
Everywhere else in the country. Instead, we're playing the game like everyone else does, and we're too small, right, because of the market. So now we've waited too long to be the innovator. And what we end up with is worrying about partners coming in, right, here into Rhode
Right.
Island to save us from a system that can't sustain itself here locally.
Now,
Right.
President Brown, Christina Paxson says, whoa, do not let partners in. It
Yeah.
will be the end of all our existing good things. It'll be the end of our med school, it'll be the end of
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
having enough resources to be able to deliver. Everybody's gonna be on a train to go up and get a surgery in Boston, and we're gonna lose a huge
Right.
number of jobs, which is only gonna make us poorer and less competitive.
But where in that argument,
Yeah,
I understand that argument.
Right.
I think we waited way too long, you know, to be the innovator, to have a strength
Sure.
of a system that could expand out of the state, as opposed to having incursions of folks trying to come in the state, right? But where's the part of that argument that's about giving me access to better models, lower cost healthcare, better outcomes? Instead, what she's talking about is how do we strengthen the med school, right? How do we create placements for more of our folks in the hospital so we can graduate more folks? How do we bring in more research dollars to create more technology?
Right.
How do we train more specialists? These are all the things that are driving costs up in our healthcare system. Where is the innovation in the stuff that's going to drive costs down or keep it flat and allow us to take better care of ourselves and to create better outcomes?
all right.
I don't hear that argument.
Let me go to the
right?
next argument.
Yeah, okay.
Bob Whitcomb, who is a proponent of for-profit hospitals, say, listen, let Brown's Partners prospect. They're motivated for innovation. They've
Yep.
got investors. They've got to make changes. They've got to really change the system. They've been successful here in the two hospitals that they're at, Roger Williams and Fatima. That's the kind of partnership you want. You want the medical school with the for-profit and see how that runs.
Well,
Because that's a more likely
These are two
scenario.
different, I think this notion, you hear the words academic integrated system,
Yep.
right, is code for strengthen the med school, enable us to train and place more specialists,
Mhm.
which I understand, but that doesn't address the issue. The issue of for-profit versus nonprofit, to me, I think that's a false choice. I don't really care what your corporate tax structure is. What I care about is your business model and whether you're delivering value to the folks who live here in Rhode Island. right? And I can get there with either a for-profit or a nonprofit.
We've heard
You
it
look
here,
at the
socialist
right.
Saul Kaplan
No,
argument.
look at the nonprofits in our own state, right? You talked about some of them, the healthcare nonprofits, right? The CEOs of these nonprofits make more than almost
Right.
all the companies.
Right.
This
They
isn't-
do make more than
It's
the
not
company.
about whether they pay taxes on the dollars or they don't. It's about what value they deliver to us as Rhode Islanders.
Okay,
right?
so let's go to the next one. I'm firing all the
All
arguments.
the arguments that one, go
You
for
know,
it.
one of the arguments that we pointed out is, listen, when there's consolidation, big-time regional consolidation, and we can look over at that building right there, Rhode Island's generally not the winner. When we give up control of one of our big, there's one over
I
there,
know.
and there's Providence Gas
That's
over
right.
there, that's now a hotel and
Right.
and a few restaurants. We lose a lot of important
Right.
jobs, we lose a
Sure.
lot of wealth, we lose a lot of involvement in the community and philanthropy and all those good things that go along with it. So if we surrender to partners, chances of innovation might be spectacular for Boston. Partners is the largest private
Yep.
employer in the state
Well,
of in the Commonwealth, over 70,000
Well,
employees.
two things. First of all, I'm not sure that argument is the central argument. I actually believe that if partners were to come in here, it's in their best interests, right, to make sure that they play the local game, build the relationships. So I don't think that argument wins the day unless.
I'm looking at
unless-
Superman building.
Unless and until, I agree with the part of your point that's about, should we have been innovating and becoming nationally good and exporting what we do outside of our borders? You know, should our large healthcare institutions have innovated so that people wanted to replicate our model and so that we were moving up towards Boston instead of having it come the other way?
Listen, I'm not arguing for
Absolutely.
parochialism,
Right.
but the reality is when a Rhode Island institution that has significant resources, assets,
I know, it's
jobs,
sad.
etc., we haven't won on any of those.
No, of course
those
not.
deals.
Why? Because we didn't innovate fast enough when our banks didn't become the national
Fleet-
players.
Fleet was.
Right, for a while, but what happens is, if the
There's always
innovation
somebody
happens
bigger.
somewhere else, right, then the center of gravity is gonna move somewhere else. You win when you're the innovator and you figure out better models and better ways to deliver value to customers.
So let's
If
go-
we had
so-
did that in healthcare, we would not be in the position of weakness today where one of our large systems, is really suffering, had to jettison.
So if partners,
Pawtucket to
if
get
partners
the-
grabs Care New England, can I make the argument that it's only a matter of time before Yale New Haven takes over Lifespan and we're annexed to our neighboring healthcare mega giants?
My message to the folks here is this is where we don't use our size as an advantage.
Right.
Right? If we play the game like everyone else does,
Yep.
we don't have the critical mass.
Right.
They have more customers there. There are more dollars in Boston than there are here. Right? If we don't use our size and say, yeah, we're smaller, but we're gonna innovate and be the leaders in the country for the way healthcare gets delivered. Everyone talks today, I'll give you an example. Everybody talks today about personalized medicine. All
Yep.
these new technologies that allow us to take individual, kind of information about you, your situation, and to tailor the approach, not this one size fits all, one pill that everybody takes,
Right.
One surgical procedure. You see this in cancer treatments today. Why don't we focus on not that building the technologies necessary, because we might create some of them, but they might get created in Boston or Silicon Valley. Why don't we become the experts in what does the delivery model look like, leveraging our size?
Kind of like Rajiv Kumar did
Exactly.
with
Oh, you see,
Virgin Pulse.
I'm a broken record on this, right? Our strategic advantage is we should be able to mobilize new models on behalf of the customers, the Rhode Island citizens, the people who live here. We should be demonstrating what population health really means here. And if we do that here,
Yep.
and we create the solutions, the tools, the processes to do that, guess what? Everyone else around the country is going to be looking at Rhode Island, and all the companies that form to provide those solutions are going to be able to export their services. If we play the healthcare game the way everyone else does, we're too small, and we won't win. Just like
Is it too late?
What? It is late in the game, because if you wanted to avoid the mess we were in today,
Yeah.
and the concern about partners,
Yeah.
being able to come in here, right? That should have been innovation that happened a long time ago to have the strength to be able to play that game outside of the borders, of our state. You can try to lean against it, with regulations and treat the border as healthcare stops at the border, right? But I don't think that's how it's going to work, and I don't think in the end that's going to win the game. I think we got to help the existing institutions to innovate from here going forward, because that's how they're going to be strong, not only serving our needs, but actually positioning themselves regionally and nationally. They're in a difficult spot when you look at this game regionally right now, right? And that's what everyone's concerned about, and that's what Christine Brown is trying to do to protect the medical school, right?
Absolutely.
And the research thing that drives their business model.
Absolutely.
Right? I want to know where the voice is for not just the people who work in the current healthcare system, although I understand that, believe me,
Right.
As an economic developer, I'm concerned about those jobs too. My first concern is for the health and well-being of Rhode Islanders and access to cost-effective, higher quality outcomes. And I want that innovation to come wherever it comes from, right? If it comes from Boston, so be it, right? Like, so be it. And it's not that far up the road. That's sacrilege to say, here in Rhode Island.
You haven't driven up
But
there recently.
let's make prime what the real challenge is here. Our health and well-being, and then secondarily, it creates a lot of jobs, right? But if you try to tune it for the jobs,
Right.
and not the actual healthcare, residences, and not then
The
you're gonna
last
get in
question.
trouble.
We just got a minute left. Is it going to be somebody else? Is it going to be Amazon with J.P. Morgan
Yeah.
and Berkshire Hathaway? Is
Right.
it going to be CVS? Is it going to be some unexpected player that's going to sneak up on these mammoth, slow-moving, lack of
That's where
innovator
the disruption-
who's going to come through and launch a product like Amazon Prime and deliver it to your house 2 days later
Well-
that used to take 2 weeks to get it?
If you're thinking about it as a traditional healthcare player, and you're not thinking that way, you're going to be vulnerable to disruption, as we've talked about many times. That's absolutely true in healthcare. Let's start, how about with the players that are already here? We've talked about CVS Health many
Yeah,
times,
right.
They have the potential to disrupt healthcare, the way it gets delivered today, and to take on the service delivery for a lot of things that don't need to happen in the
Right.
higher cost settings, right? And they're here, and a lot of their jobs are here,
Right.
Why aren't we enabling them to innovate, and to disrupt? Why? Because the incumbents in our existing system don't like when they do that very much. But if you think about it through the Rhode Island lens, again, put the citizen and the consumer at the center of this conversation, right? Because I think that's the way you get to the right answer. But you're right. Other players, every time Jeff Bezos sneezes,
Yeah.
with some idea of what he's going to do in healthcare, right? All the stock prices of all the traditional healthcare companies gets tanked, right? Are we really watching that movie?
Is that you
playing
constantly putting pepper before his nose and selling everything on the,
Well,
and
it's certainly-
shorting all the
It's
stocks
certainly
of all
helped
the...
interest in what we do at BIF. There's no question about that.
Listen, thanks so much. Another great conversation. I want to thank everybody for tuning in on Business Monday. Tomorrow, Ava Gaudette is back at the 3 o'clock hour on Arts and Entertainment, and Kate Nagel is back. She's been at, I think, every press conference in the state of Rhode Island today. The POSOX poll, the governor's red flag press conference on gun control. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Thank our friends at Navigant Credit Union for sponsoring the broadcast center, and also our friends at Deepwater Wind, who've been a great partner in bringing Business Monday to everybody. Thanks, and over and out.